a lake so deep and clear, soaring to the tops of the trees, dancing by my window. Like a wind blowing through my door, distant voices, distant voices, distant voices, distant voices.
Let us out for recess one morning, and when they rang the bell for to come in back into class, what I did is I jumped the fence. It wasn't far away, into a new field of brown, beautiful brown earth, you know. And I stood facing the sun. Yeah, people might call that a vision. But I didn't see anything, but I was standing there facing the sun. And the thought was put into my mind, I wonder if I'm going to live into a strange time.
One of my earliest memories of my dad, our Solomon, is that of sitting every evening with him in a big chair. He would have 5 or 6 children on his lap and wrapped around the chair. He'd sing 1 or 2 nursery rhymes and read 1 fairy tale and 1 educational or science story from the books of knowledge. Another memory I have is of his hard work as he dug the garden by hand and planted potatoes and vegetables with which we'd pay our rent. I also remember our Saturday or Sunday family outings. In summer, we'd row across Killarney Bay to pick berries, and in winter, we'd be going to the bush where he was cutting wood. He always had time to help us appreciate the magnificent beauty of a land that's now called the Mecca of the North, Ontario's crown jewel. For us living in Killarney, this beauty was simply a constant part of our daily lives. What's the value of the native people going back to search their traditions?
Well, it means living very simply and very humbly, realizing that we don't own the earth, we don't own anything on here. It was all put here before we came, and we were to use it and to live in harmony with the creation, which means with each other as men and women and children. So that's the understanding of that. So we can't become the oppressors and be the teachers as well. But here in North America, we have the responsibility, perhaps in the whole Western Hemisphere, to teach those people how to live in harmony with the creation. They can't do that as long as their greed and arrogance remains. We can't teach them.
And we can't teach them if we continue to hold any...
No, if we hold grudges, but we don't hold grudges. Some of our young people have been terribly angry for many, many years. And it's been called a blood anger. I call it an inherent anger. And they haven't known what to do with their anger. They respond to a negative society in negative ways, and they have all kinds of laws, they have all kinds of prisons and so on. And so we have a responsibility, the older ones, to teach our young people how to use that anger in their own favor. And that's beginning to happen.
Maybe just start by telling us a little bit about your childhood growing up in Killarney and what Killarney was like and what your situation was like.
Well, the situation was bad, part of it at least. Because, my dad had married a white woman, a French woman from Peterborough in Toronto. And They got the notion that she should be ostracized. So they ostracized the children as well, except for one auntie who was good to us.
It was her own family that was ostracizing her? Or the
No.
community?
The relatives ostracized my mother,
Yeah,
my father's relative.
yeah,
So it was a pretty hard situation to grow up in.
yeah. And then your dad died when you were really very young.
Well, I was 15 years
Yeah.
old, I guess, when he died. 1928.
Yeah.
December the 28th.
And how did that affect you, and what bearing did it have on the way you planned
It
your life?
didn't seem to have any bearing whatever. Because my dad only spoke to me 4 or 5 times. You know, you need to remember that he was guiding all summer,
Mm-hmm.
and he was cutting logs in the wintertime and trapping and that kind of stuff. And after I went to Spanish school, there was no more contact until the summertime. Then he was guiding me.
So you hardly ever saw him?
That's right. Yeah. He was a good man.
Mm.
And they said at one time that he was the best guide in that part of the country. Because he could cook meals, you know, do anything, you know.
I know that you didn't spend a lot of time at Spanish, and yet you certainly educated yourself in a lot of ways.
I walked out of school at 15 years of age, or close to 16 years of age. Yeah, I didn't drop out, I walked out. And I never went back again. But I have continued to educate myself by reading, you know, many ways.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I have 2 honorary doctorates. And, well, they don't weigh very heavy. I was also considered for a 3rd one from Carleton University, but they gave it to George Erasmus instead,
Mm-hmm.
which is good. Share them around.
You talked about the Medewan Society and how they told you that there was this possibility of an honorary doctorate. How did you get involved in that, really? Because when we were little, that wasn't part of your story. You were really very traditionally Catholic at that point.
Yes. How I got interested in the Medewan Society is because I had come to the conclusion over a number of years that the church had lost its message. They could talk about it, but they couldn't live it. Mm-hmm. There were good people within the Catholic faith tradition. And I still respect them and honor them and accept them totally. But I came to the conclusion in St. Andrew's Parish, there was a little priest there after Father Kennedy, and he was essentially a dictator.
Mm-hmm.
So while he preached his sermon, I came to the consideration that I am responsible for me when I go back to the spirit world. I'm responsible for me. I can't say the priest told me to do this and do that and so on. So that's how I come to make the decision over a number of years.
You mentioned that a long time ago there was an experience you had that reminds me of the one you just said in terms of I am responsible to the Creator.
Yeah.
And I'm the one who has to go back and answer for how I live my life.
Yeah.
And someone told you something about not being able to change the world.
Oh, that was that father, you know, the Dutchman in Sioux?
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. What's his name?
Tyson.
Father Tyson, yeah.
Frank Tyson.
Yeah, he was a good friend of mine, you know.
Yeah.
And I used to come and visit him every time I went through the Sioux,
Mm-hmm.
And one time, it was so funny, you know. He gave me a blast, you know, it blew me right out of the water. He said, "You can't change the world all by yourself." And I thought about that for a while.
Yes.
And I realized that I was changing the world because I was changing me. And that's where you begin.
Yes.
That's the important part. You don't do it out there. You do it within first. The teaching in the Bible that says, do not have revenge, for revenge is mine alone.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we live by, whether we know it or not. And as a people, we're not any more perfect than any other of God's children on this earth, you know. So then we were punished for having left those good ways behind, but also that we have a vital concern to teach those people. That's part of the understanding of that meaning of why the man was to come here. Because wherever he has gone on the earth, wherever he's put his hand on the earth and on the people of the earth, he is devastated. That's been the history. And we have to heal this sacred earth again. And we need help to do that. But we cannot become the oppressors and the teachers at the same time. It doesn't work. The prophecy of the seven fires talks about an eighth fire that will be lit if those people who came to this land will see what we're seeing, what we're talking about. And together we will light an eighth fire, and there will be peace and tranquility on the earth again. It's guaranteed anyway, because after the purification, those who live through that time will be given their original instructions again how they are to live on the earth. And it's said in the Bible that there will be that evil power will be chained up for 1,000 years in the apocalypse, eh? And people will live in peace and tranquility again. That will.
In the mid-60s, Art became more involved in searching out his own native identity. Out of his personal struggle and his commitment to search for the true meaning of life, he began to assist others in their search for dignity and wholeness. Through his work as a spiritual advisor for the Native Studies program in Sudbury, he became directly involved with Native inmates in most provincial and federal prisons in Ontario. He's the first Native spiritual leader to be recognized by the prison system as being on a par with other chaplains. He also played a significant role in having Native traditional ceremonies made accessible to the inmates. Prisons are an abomination, he says, and the justice system is really a just us system based on greed and racism, as he explains in his poetry.
They say that the wheels of justice, they grind slowly. Yes, we know. But they grind and they grind and they grind and they grind. It seems like they grind forever. And what they grind is human beings and how they grind. They grind away the humanity of the victims who get caught in its jaws. Oh, God, protect us from a law-abiding society. Have pity on us who are its victims. Protect us, O God, from those who say we are Christians, because we know that if Christ walked visibly among them today, they'd throw him in jail tomorrow. When Christopher Columbus landed here in this sacred land, there was not one person in a prison. There was no prison. There were no prison guards. There were no lawyers and no judges and no policemen, because we didn't need them. And that's what we have to teach as part of the teaching that we have to give in this land. I can't ever come to believe that God ever intended for any of her children, his children, to be locked up in iron cages behind stone walls For me, that is an abomination. That's why I've had to work at prison abolition. We don't need them. What we have to do is to learn to live in harmony with the creation.
What kind of voices do we need to hear?
I think the voice that needs to be heard now is a voice that is an imperative, that we are reestablishing our sovereignty, reasserting our sovereignty as Native people, and it's absolutely imperative. It will happen regardless of who tries to stop it or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That's an imperative voice. And we also need to hear the voice of women speaking out the way they need to speak out. Because, you know, we were created in harmony and balance, total harmony and balance. And we're all out of balance now between men and women.
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't get back into balance, we're not going to make it. So, one of the voices, what I heard 2.5 years ago in Edmonton, or in Fredericton rather, was that women have to pick up their medicine to heal a sick and troubled world. And I was challenged at the United Church of Canada Convocation in Victoria. Before that, I went a couple of days before to meet with what was called the Native Circle Conference.
Mm-hmm.
And I spoke those words, that women have to pick up their medicine, you know, to heal a sick and troubled world. But I hadn't thought about it beyond that, eh?
Mm-hmm.
So a young woman from Rama Reserve challenged me. She said, what is a woman's medicine? So I had to think about it over the winter. And I had to come to the conclusion that the woman is the medicine.
We were sitting at home in Garson, and you said something that totally amazed me. And you said, Mama was sitting there at the table, and you were talking to someone else, and you said, I think that if I could understand something of a woman's love, I would know something of God. And it just struck me that you could be married to this woman for 35 or 40 years and still be able to marvel at that gift in her.
Yeah. Well, I was traveling down a beautiful Sunday afternoon like today, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and I said I'm going to understand God. I know, first of all, it's impossible, but I'm going to understand God. So I pondered that question in the afternoon I was driving down there. And I came to the conclusion that the closest point for me to understand God was at the point of the conception of a new human being. So that's where I had to begin to look. So in order to understand God, I first had to understand every woman that lives today, every woman that has ever lived in the past, and every woman who's going to live into the future.
Mm-hmm.
So that's and I'm only just beginning, eh? So that's the beginning, that's the understanding of the impossibility, but I dealt with it, eh? So I came to a much greater appreciation of women as a result of that.
I remember your response when you came out of one of the rooms at the conference we had this summer, the Ontario Native Cattery Conference.
Yeah.
You came out saying the magic is working.
Yeah.
Now that you've been away from that conference for a couple of months, what's your reflection on it?
The magic is love. That's the magic. And in terms of the prisons of Canada, we have done miracles. We have the power of miracles within us, you know. So, looking at that conference, I don't see anything beyond it was a conference. It was a good conference, too.
Mm-hmm. What did you mean when you said, I never thought that I would see this happening in my day, but it's here before my eyes?
Well, that's the magic that I'm talking about, eh? Because it was people together doing things, and not only Roman Catholics, but also people like myself who are born-again pagan, you know.
Mm-hmm. Art has been a rebel all his life, a man who has fought against any kind of injustice or oppression. In his own transformation, he has much wisdom to offer others, the wisdom of a Solomon. Although he minimizes his own contribution to the betterment of society, he proudly proclaims that we're all chosen people. We're chosen by the Creator to live in unity and harmony with all of creation, by listening to those distant voices within each of us that speak to our own personal transformation and to the original instructions which the Creator gave to us. When I was talking to someone before, I said, if we want to know our identity as Canadians, we need to know what it means to be the Native people, and to there is no North without knowing the Native people.
Well, people have devastated so much of the earth, you know, and they want to go to a place where they can find peace and tranquility. And for years I used to drive on the highways, you know. I did a lot of driving. I think I drove about 750,000 miles. And I used to pick up hitchhikers now and then. Some of them were those back to the land people.
Mm-hmm.
And they were forming communities which grew like mushrooms, you know. They would form them and they would disappear again. And I had to come to the conclusion that the reason that they disappeared so quickly is that they brought the same philosophies that destroyed them and other people in the cities to those places. And they destroyed those places too. Whereas the people in the north still live as best they can with the destruction around them, which is not as far along as it is in, you know, the more civilized part of the world. So it's a place of beauty and tranquility, still unspoiled nature to a large extent. But there's been a lot of destruction too.
I remember a green car you used to have. It was called a Rebel.
Oh, yeah.
I remember you meeting someone and him teasing you about that car because of you. And I would just wonder where you get the energy to keep on speaking out against the injustices that you see and to go on.
Well, you might as well ask a plant how it gets the energy to grow. It comes from the sun, the rain, the wind, and the air, and from the earth. That's how I get my energy, I guess.
If you thought this was the last time you had to give a message, what would you say?
I'd say to hell with it. I do the best. I've understood, you know, for a number of years that my responsibility in this world is to do the best that I possibly can do and to leave nothing undone that I can do and leave the rest to the Creator. So I can say to hell with it. I've done what I could today, and that's all.
Vision TV is redefining public broadcasting.
Soaring to the tops of the trees, dancing by my window. Like a wind blowing through my door, distant voices, distant voices.
father would get up very, very early in the mornings and would be gone all day on the trap line. And when he would return, he would bring back his furs, and my mother and father would sit and skin the furs. And I can remember sitting there watching for hours, watching my parents work, with the furs. And that to me was really a beautiful experience.